Okay, this is the dedication page for Blanche of Castile to Louis IX, and it's made in about 1230 CE. This page is currently in the Morgan Library, but the majority of the book is in Toledo, Spain. So during the 13th century, Paris gains a lot of renown not only for its architecture and sculptural techniques, but it also becomes very famous for its illuminated manuscripts. So, manuscript painters would flock to Paris and other urban regions and would join workshops supervised by university officials who controlled the production and distribution of these books. The books would range from small Bibles used as textbooks by university students to extravagant devotional works filled with theological passages and exquisite miniatures. This page is an example of a particular elaborate book for that time. It's a 3-volume moralized Bible. A moralized Bible has passages that are paired with either an allegory or a moralized interpretation that uses pictures and words to convey what the message of the biblical text is. The dedication page here shows Louis IX and his mother, Queen Blanche of Castile, who served as regent of France until he came of age. Blanche ruled from 1226 when her husband died of dysentery, or Louis VIII, and up until 1234 when her son came of age. The royal pair are emphasized by their slightly oversized heads. They're also sitting on royal thrones, and her gesture indicates she is dedicating this illuminated manuscript with its lessons and morals to the young king. Underneath Blanche and her son are, on the left-hand side, is a clerical scholar who dictates to the scribe, who is underneath Louis IX, and they appear to be working on specific pages of the background. We have a solid gold background under multicolored architectural framework, and this design is clearly derived from stained glass windows with trefoil shapes and stacked images. Each of the books has 2 vertical strips of painted scenes whose images match the excerpt to the text, which is either a summary of a scriptural passage or a contemporary interpretation of the allegory. And so the pictures and text would alternate between scriptural summary and their moralized explanations. So some of the things, just some details in the upper register of this page. The enthroned king and queen, they were traditional medieval open crowned, topped with a fleur de lis. It's spelled Fleur-de-Lys, which is basically a stylized iris or lily, but it symbolizes the French monarch's religious, political, and dynastic right to rule. And you see the fleur de lis everywhere in Paris and in France. It's very much a symbol of the monarchy. So the queen is veiled in a white widow's outfit. It has ermine lined and has a blue mantle that drapes over her shoulders. And there's a slender green column that divides the queen's space from that of her son, King Louis IX, who she's deliberately gesturing to across the page, raising her left hand in his direction. Her pose and her animated facial expression suggest she's dedicating this manuscript with its lessons and morals to the young king. Now, Louis IX is wearing an open crown on his head. He returns his mother's glance, and in his right hand he holds a scepter, which indicates his kingly status. And there's also a fleur-de-lis there, and also a small bird sits. There's a 4-petaled brooch that is dominated by a large sapphire blue in the center, and that's secures the pink mantle lined with the green, and that rests on his boyish shoulders. So he also is holding a small golden ball or disc between his forefinger and thumb in his left hand. And during the mass that followed coronations, French kings and queens would traditionally give the presiding bishop of Reims 13 gold coins. And this could be a reference to Louis's 1226 coronation, just 3 weeks after his father's death, which is probably the date that the Bible may have been commissioned. Let's see. The manuscript is lavish, and it would have taken many years to complete, which is good timing because the 21-year-old Louis was ready to assume the rule of his Capetian king from his mother. So, and then Queen Blanche and her son are also echoing a gesture and pose that would have been familiar to many Christians, which would have been the Virgin Mary and Christ enthroned side by side as celestial rulers of heaven, which was found in many numerous coronations of the Virgin. This scene is especially prevalent in the tympana, or the top semicircle that is over the cathedral portals throughout France. And we definitely could see this connection between the Queen Blanche and her son, anointed by God with divine right to rule, and that of Mary, Queen of Heaven, and her son, that are divine figures of this for salvation. Okay, so the bottom register depicts the cleric. He has a shaved head and a sleeveless cloak, which would be appropriate for divine services. He is an educated man, and they're emphasizing his role as a scholar. He tilts his head forward and points his right forefinger at the artist across from him as though giving instructions. No clues are given as to the cleric's religious order, but he probably represents many Parisian theologians that are responsible for the manuscript's visual and literary content. And then on the right side of this page, we have the artist wearing a blue surcoat and wearing a cap and seated on a cushioned bench. He had a knife and a stylus in his hands. He looks down at his work. And Blanche undoubtedly handpicked the theologian whose job it was to establish the manuscript's guidelines. They would put select biblical passages, write explanations, hire the copyists, and oversee the images that the artist should paint. So art and text are mutually dependent, spelling out advice to its readers that Louis IX and perhaps his siblings could practice in their rule. So this is a beautiful example of illuminated manuscript, and one that shows, you could see the architecture in the background, you could see the columns over here. This is what is meant by the trefoil right there. And then this would be the different scenes with the explanations of the text on these pages here. So this is one of the most beautiful examples of illuminated manuscripts that we still have. And as I stated before, it is in the J.P. Morgan Library and Museum. I think that's in New York. Okay, moving on.